Chapter 3 is opportunity monopolized. No man is kept poor because opportunity has been taken away from him or because other people have monopolized the wealth and have put a fence around it. You may be shut off from engaging in business in certain lines, but there are other channels open to you. Probably it would be hard for you to get control of any of the great railroad systems. That field is pretty well monopolized. But the electric railway business is still in its infancy and offers plenty of scope for enterprise, and it will be but for a very few years until traffic and transportation through the air will become a great industry and, in all its branches, will give employment to hundreds of thousands and perhaps to millions of people. Why
Chapter
not turn?
right? And Megan, this is chapter 3. Sorry, we should have said that. But that
Yeah.
just shows how old the book is.
Oh, yeah, it does.
He's talking about
Railway
railway.
systems.
What a visionary.
Originally published in 1910.
Crazy. Okay, cool.
Why not turn your attention to the development of aerial transportation instead of competing with J.J. Hill and others for a chance in the steam railway world? It is quite true that if you are a workman in the employ of the Steel Trust, you have very little chance of becoming the owner of the plant in which you work. But it is also true that if you will commence to act in a certain way, you can soon leave the employ of the Steel Trust. You can buy a farm of from 10 to 40 acres and engage in business as a producer of foodstuffs. There is great opportunity at this time for men who will live upon small tracts of land and cultivate the same intensively. Such men will certainly get rich. You may say that it is impossible for you to get the land, but I'm going to prove to you that it is not impossible and that you can certainly get a farm if you will go to work in a certain way.
That certain way is kind of a funny thing, right? It's like he's building what a certain way is into our brain. So it's like an abstract concept that we recognize that, you know what, I'm not thinking the way I need to be thinking. That's the way I look at it anyway.
Yeah, because the whole first part of the book is all him referencing this thing that he hasn't even told you what it is yet.
No,
He's
not
basically
one.
building the case for why this is relevant.
Yeah.
I get very
Makes me
impatient at this
curious.
point.
I know. It makes
Come
me
on,
very curious too.
give it to me so I can evaluate where he's trying to build a case for why it is.
Well, the thing I notice the most is how much he is thinking like an entrepreneur and understanding that there's always another way. There's always an option that we're not looking at. Like the abundance is there, we're just not looking.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, his basic assumption is that there's plenty of opportunity and it's you that needs to adjust and calibrate to all of the opportunity. And that if you don't perceive that, that's your calibration. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with reality.
Interesting, huh?
Right. At different periods, the tide of opportunity sets in different directions according to the needs of the whole and the particular stage of social evolution which has been reached. At present in America, it is setting towards agriculture and the allied industries and professions. Today, opportunity is open before the factory worker in his line. It is open before the businessman who supplies the farmer more than before the one who supplies the factory worker, and before the professional man who waits upon the farmer more than before the one who serves the working class.
Oh man.
There is abundance of opportunity for the man who will go with the tide instead of trying to swim against it. Talking to
Abundant,
a bunch of individualists, everyone wants to do it their own way, right?
yeah. Abundant opportunity. Okay. Basically looking at the way it is in the world and accepting whatever the problem is that you could find a solution for.
And finding the wave that you want to catch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the factory workers, either as individuals or as a class, are not deprived of opportunity. The workers are not being kept down by their masters. They are not being ground by the trusts and combinations of capital. As a class, they are where they are because they do not do things in a certain way. If the workers of America chose to do so, they could follow the example of their brothers in Belgium and other countries and establish great department stores and cooperative industries. They could elect men of their own class to office and pass laws favoring the development of such cooperative industries, and in a few years, they could take peaceable possession of the industrial field. I get irritated at the first part of that, this whole like, oh, everybody's equal, you just have to try harder, right? Because that's a very popular
Yeah.
bone to pick these days.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he immediately jumps to Belgium and the cooperative industries, that to me sets me up to see the opportunity again.
I don't know anything about that. What's that about?
Well, it's
Belgium.
basically like, when you go to Honest Weight Co-op in Albany,
Okay.
right? They're able to have a grocery store in an urban area because a bunch of people raised a bunch of money to set up the storefront to order. So you can
Yeah.
order in bulk because you've developed a whole community of people who want what you have to offer. And you just
Okay.
figure out how to make it work. You don't have to go buy a Tops chain or a Walmart chain
Right.
and set it in your community. You figure out
Right.
who in your community wants to support what you have to offer.
Right. And he also assumes you're responsible for the enrollment of the idea, which is one of the highest skill levels you can have.
Right. And he's also, this is we're supposed to be in a representative democracy in our country, not just straight democracy, which is mob rule, but representative is you can elect men of your own class to office
Yep.
and pass laws favoring the developments of such cooperative industries. And
That's a
that's the big thing about politics, right? Nobody wants to get involved in it. And I get that. But on the other hand, if you're not representing your interests, then who is?
right. That's the sovereign's way also that any commerce determined between individuals is something nobody else really can get involved in if it's a private exchange, which kind of that's what they call co-op. It's a bunch of different private exchanges, right?
Which is kind of super interesting because have you heard anything about Ross Ulbricht that Trump pardoned?
No, tell me about that.
He was this guy who developed this whole, I think it was like a Craigslist before Craigslist, but it was all under the radar. So people can buy and sell without any kind of oversight. It was all people would jump into it and they could do whatever. The issue with the feds went after him over is that they were using it for drugs and they're saying that they used it for uh, buying and trading sex as well. So things that are considered illegal. But the libertarians have really been pushing his freedom because he's been in jail for 10 years with 2 lifetime sentences. And they're like, this is absurd. Everybody who participated, they participated free exchange. Like, who are you to
Yeah,
come in and shut him down and throw him in jail?
yeah, yeah.
So Trump just pardoned him, but it's become this big lightning rod
Well, who
again.
knows if it was really true that, I mean, it could be because the government wasn't making money and wasn't involved that they made up that he was doing it for sex and drugs.
Well, and the other thing is he developed the system. Other people did the buying and trading. That's the libertarian argument. They're like, look, he created this amazing network for people to buy
Oh,
and trade.
wow.
And because people used it for their own nefarious ends, they still were participating in a buy and sell
Right.
exchange.
The same thing happened to the guy that created Telegram.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, he's getting in trouble for what people are talking about. And all he did is create the tool and he believes in uncensored, but he's still like, if it goes, safety's involved. I, I think it's Justice sent me that clip about him and where he came from and everything. And the US has been like the hardest place for him to be. As far as like trying to get away from the government.
Yep. Yep.
Look at and Telegram, it's just him and his brother. That's it. They don't have any employees.
Telegram's a whole other narrative because
Yeah.
there's been a bunch going on about that.
Yeah.
You look at different countries' interests, right? And to the degree of people feel entitled to, if you create something, are you going to be responsible for the creation of it?
Right. Interesting. Okay, so back to the book here. Thank you.
The working class may become the master class if they will begin to do things in a certain way. The law of wealth is the same for them as it is for all others. This they must learn, and they will remain where they are as long as they continue to do as they do. The individual worker, however, is not held down by the ignorance or the mental slothfulness of his class. He can follow the tide of opportunity to riches, and this book will tell him how.
That's awesome.
Turn of the century, they're
Oh
hardcore.
man, this is the all American dream. You know what I mean? It's like the belief that you have free enterprise, and I know our free enterprise gets abused, but you think about Juanetta was talking about Cher today and what she went through to get her like life to be the way it is, like totally transforming any sort of limitation into a possibility. We've all heard the underdog stories.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I like too the way this guy, like in America, is this whole idea of people say it's a dream, the American dream, right? Anybody can bootstrap their way through it,
Hmm.
which I feel like there's a lack of grace in saying, like, oh, you should just try harder. Where this guy's like, yeah, but you got to try in a certain way. This is the way to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
Just burning yourself up And hustling 24/7 isn't necessarily going to get you where you need to go.
No, you got to be innovative. Interestingly enough, too, if you look at SFG as a community, like how well the people have done that were entrepreneurial enough to create solutions for the problems that arose within the company,
Yeah.
right? Level up leads, this example,
Yep.
right? And the technology that the Smith brothers created. It was all designed to help the people, insurance agents, to succeed. And, they're doing well because of those tools they provided. The people that made the most money in the gold rush were the people that sold the shovels, right? Or something like that. You heard that saying before?
I haven't. That's a good one, though.
Yeah. Leave it to me to butcher it if it's not the right way, but somebody
Right.
somebody will tell me. Is there any more? That's a short
No,
chapter?
there's more. No one is kept in poverty by a shortness in the supply of riches. There is more than enough for all.
That's
A
amazing.
palace as large as the Capitol at Washington might be built for every family on earth from the building material in the United States alone. And under intensive cultivation, this country would produce wool, cotton, linen, and silk enough to clothe each person in the world finer than Solomon was arrayed in all his glory. All this together with food enough to feed them all luxuriously.
Wow.
The visible supply is practically inexhaustible, and the invisible supply really is inexhaustible. Everything you see on earth is made from one original substance, out of which all things proceed. New forms are constantly being made, and older ones are dissolving, but all are shapes assumed by one thing. There is no limit to the supply of formless stuff, capital formless stuff, or original substance, capital original substance. The universe is made out of it, but it was not all used in making the universe. The spaces in, through, and between the forms of the visible universe are permeated and filled with the original substance, capitalize, with the formless stuff, capitalize, with the raw material of all things. 10,000 as much as has been made might still be made, and even then we should not have exhausted the supply of universal raw material. No man, therefore, is poor because nature is poor or because there is not enough to go around.
Yeah.
Nature is an inexhaustible storehouse of riches. The supply will never run short. Original substance is alive with creative energy and is constantly producing more forms. When the supply of building material is exhausted, more will be produced. When the soil is exhausted so that foodstuffs and materials for clothing will no longer grow upon it, it will be renewed or more soil will be made. Which is interesting, right? Because this was before the Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now everybody's into organic and soil. I'm not everyone, right? But there's a big movement now to how do you remediate
Yeah.
your soil and make your soil thrive?
Right.
Regenerative agriculture.
Right. And you know how we think about the problems on the planet? We learned this from Keith Raniere's forums, right? It's like you look at the problems with the whales or the pollution or all this stuff, and what's actually causing it? It's us, right? And I've heard little kids even say, actually, Lori's grandson was saying the other day when he saw the sunset, and he said, wow, I wonder what it looked like before all of us was here. Like the perception of a little kid to see like how beautiful the earth is. And my point is, it's us that has the perception that is limited, that comes with what we've done on the earth, instead of seeing that our perception of thinking that there's less or there's a problem is us trying to effects management ourselves in how we engage with the earth. Do you know what I
So
mean?
trying to control our own definition of how we understand ourselves rather than recognizing that it's us that are limited.
And until we started reading this book, like the other day, I was out looking at the acorns, like one tree. Do you know how many freaking acorns? And people get pissed about it, right? I was over at Kelly and Scott's in the middle of the winter. There's like pine cones freaking everywhere, and every pine cone has hundreds of seeds, and each one of those makes a tree. And we're like, oh yeah, there's not enough to go around here. It's like so far from the truth. That perception that he pushes on in this is what I think has helped me the most so far. Is like really seeing how blindsided I've been either by my own indoctrination or the fallout from the depression and the way people experienced, right? All of that. Our parents embedded that. There's never enough. There's never enough. So you have that going on as like an underlying belief that we're not even aware of. And that's probably why he doesn't even describe what the certain way is, because he knows we're all so blocked even back then, right? Well, but that way that we look at the world though is really us not being spiritually connected in our abundance of our own spirit being able to expand. That's my opinion. I don't know if that's true. We cause it by our thinking. It's not actually true. Ever. Never has been. It's all us not wanting to see things in a certain way, which we don't even know what that is yet, but we're going to figure it out.
Nature is an inexhaustible storehouse of riches. The supply will never run short. Original substance is alive with creative energy and is constantly producing more forms. When the supply of building material is exhausted, more will be produced. When the soil is exhausted so that foodstuffs and materials for clothing will no longer grow upon it, it will be renewed or more soil will be made. When all the gold and silver has been dug from the earth, if man is still in such a stage of social development that he needs gold and silver, more will be produced from the formless. The formless stuff responds to the needs of man. It will not let him without any good. It will not let him be without any good thing. That's abundance right there, right?
Right. So it's us that blocks it. It's us. And like every time I ever think lack, I'm just going to tell myself, okay, Esther, why do you feel better thinking that way? Because that's the only reason I would think that way. Because it doesn't make sense and it's not true. There's never a lack, ever. And we went over the gratitude stuff, right? The other day, I was thinking about that all day too. I was like, thank God, that's coming up next, though, right?
Well, that's further on because that was chapter 7 and this is chapter 3. And I'm actually thinking, did we even cover chapter 2 with the recording? Because I know we went through chapter 2 as a warm up, but I think, yeah, I thought I had it.
Yeah, I think we did. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, one thing I know for sure, it's so deep. It's like you can go back and forth. It won't even matter. So if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
just fix it.
This is exact. Do you want to finish this chapter? There's like 5.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. It is true of man collectively. The race as a whole is always abundantly rich. And if individuals are poor, it is because they do not follow the certain way of doing things which makes the individual man rich. What is the certain way?
Say that again. Read that again.
What is true of man collectively? The race as a whole is always abundantly rich. And if individuals are poor, it is because they do not follow the certain way of doing things which makes the individual man rich.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
The formless stuff is intelligent. It is stuff which thinks. It is alive and is always impelled toward more life. That's the acorns, right?
Yeah.
One acorn grows a tree that grows 1,000 more acorns, which grows 1,000 more acorns, which grows 1,000 more acorns.
Yeah. And that's just one example.
Yeah.
I mean, just go on.
Ecology.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It is the natural and inherent impulse of life to seek to live more. It is the nature of intelligence to enlarge itself and of consciousness to seek to extend its boundaries and find fuller expression. The universe of forms has been made by formless living substance, throwing itself into form in order to express itself more fully. The universe is a great living presence, capital, living capital presence, always moving inherently toward more life and fuller functioning. Nature is formed for the advancement of life. Its impelling motive is the increase of life. Just think rabbits and mice, right? Just reproduce abundantly.
Totally. And I was also thinking about the way we live. Like, what if the reason we have this experience of lack is because of what's causing it, the greed of thinking I need to keep it all to myself to feel safe, right? It's like if I have the only oak tree, I covet all the acorns and they choke themselves out because there's not enough space for them to expand.
And there's not a recognition that I'm in an ecology where other forms also need those acorns to continue, right?
Yeah,
Like the
and the
squirrels are running
acorns
around all
need
the
certain
time.
things. Like
Yep.
Or if you look at dandelions, right?
Yep.
Dandelions need to have the wind to grow them, and then they go everywhere. It's like impossible to keep dandelions from coming onto your lawn, right? But nobody looks at that as like, wow, look at the abundance. They're like, "Yeah, dandelions,
And then you
right?
feel limited, right? You feel limited because you don't have enough resources or time or energy to get them all rid of them because you don't want them.
Isn't that crazy? That's a good example of how much we restrict ourselves. Well, I don't like dandelions. Oh, well, sorry. Sorry. That's basically saying I don't like abundance.
Nature is formed for the advancement of life. Its impelling motive is the increase of life. For this cause, everything which can possibly minister to life is bountifully provided. There can be no lack unless God is to contradict himself and nullify his own works. You
Wow.
are not kept poor by lack in the supply of riches. It is a fact which I shall demonstrate a little farther on that even the resources of the formless supply, capital, formless, capital supply, are at the command of the man or woman who will act and think in a certain way.
So form really can't do much without us. We're the spirit gods on the earth that allow. Is that what that means, do you think? Formless. I don't even know what that means.
I
Form.
think it's like bigger than us, though. Like
Yeah.
the resources, they're there for us to use it once it's like when you're not entrusted with the tools until you're at a place of being able to conduct yourself to master the tool. You don't give a power saw
Yeah.
to a 4-year-old,
Right. There you go.
but it's there to use when somebody's ready to use it.
Awesome, Megan. Well, I hope our viewers enjoy this as much as we are. Might let them look at us this time.
A whole other level.
I love how you read, though, Megan. It helps. Really. This
Good.
this is not a book that you can just read and set it down. So,
Well, it's
but
nice to have someone else to work through it with and just
yeah,
to keep your mental energy focused. Because when I peter out, then you have something to
yeah,
contribute.
right. And I don't think you can digest it any other way.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
All
thanks
right.
everybody for coming. Appreciate you. Thanks, Megan.
Yeah.
Bye.